There is a specific kind of discomfort that comes from watching someone look directly into a camera lens in the year 1910. Not the blur of motion, not the grain of the film, the eyes. You have seen this footage, the cobblestones of Vienna slick with October rain, a tram groaning around a corner on the Ringstrasse, and there, in the middle of it all, a man in a dark wool coat who stops, turns, and stares. Not at the camera exactly, through it. As if he can see something on the other side that you cannot. As if the lens is a window and he has just noticed you standing at it. That expression, calm, knowing, faintly resigned, appears in footage from Berlin, from Paris, from Budapest, from Lisbon. City after city, decade after decade of the early 20th century, and it is always the same look. Nobody told these people to perform. There was no director. There was barely even a concept of being filmed. And yet every single one of them carries that expression like a coat they were born wearing. The question is not why they look that way. The question is what they actually knew. To understand the weight behind those eyes, you have to understand the precise moment in history these people were living through. The year 1910 sits at the absolute center of one of the most catastrophic pivot points in recorded human civilization. These men and women existed on a razor's edge between two worlds. The old one, which had been stable for centuries and had its own brutal logic, and a new one that was accelerating toward them with a speed nothing in human experience had prepared them for. They could feel it, not intellectually, physically, in the vibration of the new electric trams beneath their feet, in the chemical sting of coal smoke that had thickened the air of every major European city to the point where a white shirt was gray by noon, in the newspapers that arrived every morning with headlines about machines that flew, about wars that were no longer fought by cavalry, but by artillery shells that could level a city block from 4 miles away. The world was changing at a rate that the human nervous system was not designed to process, and these people were processing it anyway, every single day, in the streets you see in that footage. What the camera captured, without intending to, was the face of collective premonition. The sociologists of the period, men like Georg Simmel, writing in Berlin in 1903, were already documenting what they called the blasé attitude. Simmel argued that city dwellers in the industrial era had developed a kind of psychological armor. The sheer density of stimulation, the noise, the speed, the strangers, the advertisements, the electric lights that kept the night from being night anymore, had forced the urban mind to retreat behind a mask of detachment. You did not react to everything because reacting to everything would destroy you. You became selective, deliberate. You looked at the world with a measured, appraising gaze because that was the only way to survive it. That gaze is what the camera caught. That is the look. It is not mystical. It is the face of a person who has learned to process industrial civilization without being consumed by it. But there is a second layer, and this one is harder to articulate. By 1910, the largest war in European history, the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, was still within living memory for anyone over 40. The Boer War had ended less than a decade prior. The Russo-Japanese War had shocked the world in 1905 by proving that a non-European power could destroy a European fleet. The Moroccan crisis of 1905 had nearly ignited a continental conflict. The Balkan Wars were less than 2 years away. The assassination in Sarajevo was 4 years in the future, but the conditions that would make it inevitable, the interlocking alliance systems, the arms races, the imperial competitions, the nationalist movements boiling beneath the surface of every major empire, were already fully assembled. Europe in 1910 was a room full of gunpowder. Everyone in it could smell something burning. They just did not know exactly where the match was. The man on the Ringstrasse in Vienna did not know there would be a war, but he knew the empire he lived inside was groaning under its own contradictions. The Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1910 governed 11 distinct nationalities, 8 official languages, and a political system so baroque in its complexity that even its own ministers sometimes could not agree on what it was supposed to do. The Hungarians wanted more autonomy. The Czechs wanted recognition. The Serbs wanted unification. And the emperor, Franz Joseph, was 80 years old, had outlived his wife to an assassin's knife and his son to a suicide, and ruled through a combination of exhausted habit and institutional inertia. The people on those streets could see the cracks, They had been watching them widen their entire lives. Paris in 1910 was living through its own specific anxiety. The city had flooded catastrophically in January of that year. The Seine rose so high that the metro tunnels filled with water. The streets of the 7th arrondissement became canals, and 45 of the city's 87 departments were underwater. 20,000 Parisians lost their homes in less than 2 weeks. The French government came within days of total administrative collapse. And this happened in the most celebrated, most photographed, most romanticized city on earth, at the height of what the French themselves called the Belle Époque, the beautiful era. The beautiful era that could drown you in your sleep. That is the open loop that the footage never closes, and it is why those eyes still reach through the screen more than a century later. These people were not performing gravity. They were living it. The factory worker in Manchester, whose hands were already deformed by 12 years at a textile loom. The woman in Berlin who had moved from a village in Silesia to work in a department store and now lived in a single rented room with 2 other women, sending money home every month, writing letters to a mother she saw once a year. The Viennese civil servant who read Freud's newly published theories about the unconscious and felt, with a chill he could not entirely explain, that someone had just described something true about him. These were not people living in sepia. They were living in full, violent, overwhelming color, and the camera, that cold, indifferent machine, caught them in the single, unguarded moment before they remembered to look away. There is one detail that historians of early cinema rarely mention, and it is this. In 1910, the act of being filmed was still deeply associated with death. The earliest films had been screened at fairs alongside other spectacles, alongside taxidermied animals, alongside photographs of executed criminals, alongside wax figures of the recently famous. The moving image had entered popular consciousness through the same door as the morgue photograph. Many ordinary people who stepped in front of a film camera in those early years genuinely believed on some level they could not quite articulate that the machine was capturing something that should not be captured. That looking into the lens was a transaction of uncertain cost. Their discomfort was not superstition. It was the correct intuition that something irreversible was happening, that they were being fixed in time in a way no human being had ever been fixed before, and that people they could not imagine, in a future they could not conceive of, would one day look back at them and wonder what they knew. They knew exactly this, that the world they were standing in was extraordinary, temporary, and accelerating toward something they could not name. They knew it the way you know a storm is coming before the sky is changed, through pressure, through the quality of the light, through a stillness that is not peace, but anticipation. They looked into those cameras with the eyes of people who understood, without being told, that the footage being taken of them would one day be evidence. Evidence of a world that was about to disappear so completely that the only way to prove it had existed would be images exactly like the ones being made at that very moment. The camera looked at them. They looked back. And across 115 years of silence, they are still looking.